Donald Trump and Republicans don't care about working people. They're just trying to hand power to corporations and billionaires. Well, Faiz Shakir, he's fighting to change all that. As former campaign manager for Bernie Sanders and the executive director of More Perfect Union, he's helping rebuild a movement that puts workers first and unites all Americans around economic justice. In this video, he breaks down how working people are organizing like never before, how More Perfect Union is fueling that movement, and the strategy Democrats need to win this fight in 2026 and 2028. But first, subscribe to this channel to stay informed about how you can defend democracy. Faiz Shakir, welcome to Defending Democracy.
Marc Elias, thank you for having me. Good to see you again.
You and I have known each other for a very long time, and a lot of people may not know that you were a senior advisor to Harry Reid, the Senate Democratic leader, to Nancy Pelosi, the soon-to-be legendary Speaker of the House, but
Yep,
maybe she's already legendary.
she is.
And you also were one of the founders of one of the most influential left of center new media startups that took place within the Center for American Progress, called Think Progress. And of course, you're most well known as the campaign manager for Bernie Sanders. What have you learned from kind of the collective of what looked to be four very different style of politics?
Yeah, and you can extend the most effective leadership styles to a lot of different people, not only Bernie, but John Podesta, who is the head of the Center for American Progress and who recruited me to join there. You talk about people who have been fortunate to learn under different styles of management and different styles of leadership, all, I would argue, very effective in the ways they do things. And so you pick and glean various things from various people. Nancy Pelosi, I would say, as leader of the House for a long period of time, the House tends to be unruly and lots of different perspectives and voices. And with Pelosi, a few things that stand out about her leadership style that I would always admire. One is she almost never walked into a room without a plan. She knew that if you didn't go in there and have a sense of what you wanted to get coming out of there, then they were going to kind of rule your roost. And so, she was, on the one hand, very attentive to every detail. Once I walk into a room, I know what is going to happen in there. And then the patience of 1,000 Jobs was to just sit there and listen to a lot of people, a lot of different voices, be, there to the very end. And she would always say, how do I take this into account and assess the positives and the negatives? And with that, earn the trust to say, Nancy Pelosi, might have a desire for you and all of us that we could win this together, follow me. And to almost all cases, she would. During her tenure, unlike John Boehner's or you go down the list, Kevin McCarthy or any Republican leader, you would always doubt whether those leaders with very narrow margins would be able to deliver the outcomes. And you're like, what revolt is going to happen and cause a kerfuffle? And, you rarely ever doubted that with Nancy Pelosi.
Did she ever lose a vote?
Not lose it, right? She maybe reschedule it, pull it back, say, I got some work to do. Not lose it. She was like very clear that if we were going forward, especially with the confidence and trust under Democratic presidents, she would steer it and they would trust it. And then Harry Reid, obviously, Senate is a very different ballgame, as you know, Mark, than the House. And, with Pelosi, you can rule a little bit more with an iron fist. This is what we're going to do. This is the rules. This is the procedures. This is how it's going to go. And I'm going to be listening to you, but this is the way it's going to go. With the Senate, there's so many choke points in which one person can decide that they can derail something or hold you up or cause, problems, that you have to earn their trust over a long period of time. And Harry Reid, you and I knew him well. Of the many talents, one wasn't his ability to be a public elocutionist. He was but he talked plainly, and he's always kind of interesting. But he wasn't many people say charismatic speaker. But what he did have was one, he would just sit on the floor forever. He would know the rules of the Senate floor like nobody's business, and he could merge that with knowing people. He's one of the few people I've ever noticed like he would sit there and listen. You remember him well. He's just like, he'd sit there quietly. He'd assess people. He watched them. And he just kind of knew them. He knew what made them tick. He knew what they liked and what they disliked. And as a result, when you got into negotiations, he had all of that up there. You could kind of leverage that to say, hey, stay with me on this one and I'll get your back on something else. And that's how he ran that thing forever and ever and did it masterfully.
Compare or contrast that however you want to Senator Sanders, right? Who I've known Senator Sanders a very long time. He was actually a college professor of mine. And one of the things that people correctly say about Bernie Sanders is he is the same person in public and in private, and he is the same person that he was 30 years ago or longer ago when I first met him as he is today. The issue sets have changed a little bit, but he is someone who is very comfortable in his own skin. And that is not something that you could say about a lot of politicians. He knows what he believes, which is, I think, one of his great skills as a communicator, one of his great skills in able to do both very conservative media as well as more progressive media, because he's very comfortable with his own skin. But he's also someone who is not that consensus builder that you describe of the other two leaders. So how does he factor into your learning?
I would put it slightly different. He's not necessarily a consensus builder because he hasn't had the position of leadership. He's a different kind of person. He's not a legislative player, is a better way to put it. Like Nancy Pelosi, Harry Reid, internal legislative
Right,
players who
right,
understood how to marshal
right.
votes to move something. Bernie's never been that kind of a person, though. As he's ascended to chairmanships of the Budget Committee and Help Committee, he's had to do that more. The thing that has always been amazing to me of having sat by Bernie's side for many, many years now, and with great appreciation of how he does his work, is not only is the convictions piece that you talked about, but it's almost like he's a tuning fork for the American public. He is so keenly populist in that way. He can reflect the feelings of wide numbers of people. And when you put him out to, I always say, put these kinds of people out in front of town. Imagine, Mark, if you and I did, let's say, 5,000 public speaking events over the next 2 years. In all those speaking events were multi-thousands of people. What you end up developing, this really, for Bernie especially, is his unique ability of knowing how people feel. You may not even be in a conversation with them one-to-one, but I promise you, he comes off the stage having talked to 10,000 people or 500 or 1,500 people, and he can tell me that here's the mood of people right now. Here's what they're upset about. Here's what they're frustrated about. Here's what they're excited about. And he's done it better than anyone I've ever seen in my life. He can just sense, as he goes through and talks with people, whether it's a small group or a large group, where is the popular attitudes right now? And for that reason, history will kindly remember, knock on wood, in Trump's second term, there's no single person who changed the dynamic of this country more than Bernie Sanders. When he first saw, after the Doge hacking of our government, and Trump felt like this man of bravado, and he was going to go and do whatever the hell he wanted, and Democrats were weak. And here comes Bernie, and he galvanizes with his first Fight Oligarchy rallies a mass protest movement that then later leads to No Kings and a whole bunch of other things. The Tesla takes us, all kinds of things were happening. But it was a Fight Oligarchy from Bernie, recognizing right now the public is very angry. And I'm going to show you, watch this. And he did show us all. And he does that repeatedly over and over again.
I want you to take off your hat as staffer, someone who has been in the position of amplifying others. You have also built your own real voice and your own real sense of what the American public is about. It is one of the reasons why you have become one of the smartest opinion leaders in the Democratic Party. So what's your sense of where the electorate is? I followed your brief foray in the DNC chairs race and thought it was really interesting because you were one of the only candidates who was willing to actually say, this is more important than this. You have a real sense for kind of like where the hierarchy of priorities are among the not just Democrats, but the American public as a whole. So what's your sense of where people are?
Well, Mark, you're very kind, but I'll operate with humility. I've never been a Senate Majority Leader or House Speaker or presidential candidate. So the people for whom I have worked have done those things, and I try to glean a little bit along the way and then have my own kind of thoughts and judgments. But I'm stating them with humility. I want to continue to learn and grow every single day here. My feeling right now is that there's a deep populist attitude in this country, rightly so. We're seeing the hubris of the elites. We're seeing a cultural decay in America. Sadly, I say, when the greatest country in the history of mankind, you're seeing a cultural decay that the elites can engage in exploitation, greed, and with their cultural values of selfishness, kind of stomp on labor in order for them to make more money. The makers are put down, the takers get even more. Passive income wealth generation is being rewarded in the greatest sense since, I can never remember in our lifetimes. And as a result, if you're anybody who's trying to toil for hard work, whether you're Starbucks barista or, a farmer who's trying to grow soybean, or anybody who's trying to do small business work in America, you're on the outs. You're understood as not having power. You're not valued in this current society, not in the tax code, not in the way that the elites that control lobbying, accounting, tax work, all preference against you. And I tend to think that that's the opportunity for the Democratic Party, that right now our brand, when it's more associated with this kind of dynamic of deep wealth and income inequality, our brand has always been strongest. Our party as a governing power has always been strongest when we associate with the underdogs, when we associate with the blue-collar workers, associate with those who toil for a living and say, your economic justice vision is one that stands up for me. And that's mostly because our sense of governance is about that too, that we fight for raising the minimum wage, we fight for expansions of healthcare, we fight for Medicaid, we fight for Social Security. Why? Because we believe government can do things to improve people's lot in life and improve the baseline of human opportunity for everyone. And that is being more challenged now in this moment than ever, which calls us to be the ones who step up to this task and deliver bold solutions to meet the moment.
Tell people who listen to this and hear the word populism and associate it with, some ugly politics. I mean, my family came to this country. They became Democrats because of the New Deal. I've had union members in my family, and the Democratic Party's economic opportunity has been central to the successes that we have. When I hear populism, I think of a right-wing movement that is quite exclusionary, that can be quite nationalist and quite dangerous, frankly, to racial and ethnic minorities, religious minorities. Help people sort out when they hear that there is this thing called populism and they associate it with, the right. How should we process it when we hear you talk about populism? I'll be right back with more of my conversation with Faiz Shakir in a moment. When I started Democracy Docket in 2020, my goal was simple: to bring you the stories that matter in the fight to defend democracy. But look, we can't do it alone. For just $10 a month, you can help Democracy Docket's team keep producing conversations like this one, shining a light on the people and movements fighting for working Americans. Support Democracy Docket now at the link in the description below.
I would say when I think of populism, there's three major components to them. Number one, a sense that you believe in movement building, that grassroots engagement of building a movement is good. And we need it. So that is a core constituency that, this is the Bernie style politics that measures himself to some degree by rally attendance. It really kind of matters to you that are regular people associate with you. Number two, that grassroots engagement affects policymaking in your policy agenda such that, hey, what people are telling me is they need X, then I'm going to be responsive to X. And number three is that as I do that policymaking, I am comfortable with friction, that there's going to have to be some fights, some differences of opinion, and I'm comfortable with engaging in that friction. Populists of the right have, this is why you raised the question, have bastardized that and done it for their own ends. But we would be remiss if we didn't recognize that a lot of the components I just talked about exist within the MAGA movement.
Right.
That is grassrootsism. They want to say build a wall, so okay, I'm going to build a wall, and then I'm going to engage in the friction against people who don't like that. That's what I'm saying. There's a version of that is healthy for our left. We have not seen enough of it, and I want to cultivate more of it. That you want grassrootsism telling you that I am deeply concerned about wealth and income inequality. I need, expansions of healthcare to live, and now I'm going to go to war with health insurance companies and pharma to ensure that I'm going to either reduce Medicare eligibility age, buy-ins, you name it, right? We could get to healthcare policy solutions. But all those kinds of things come from a sense of grassrootsism, which in my view, Mark, and this is kind of the source of your question, is it's been missing in action too much from the Democratic Party ethos for the past few years. We need to cultivate that once again and reward and incentivize grassrootsism within our party.
The buzzword of the time, as we are recording this, is affordability. This is now the word that everyone from Mikey Sherrill, who I don't think you would say is a populist, I'm not sure she would call herself a
She has
populist.
some populist elements to her plan,
Okay.
right? To declare a state of emergency over electricity rates is a populist
Yeah.
approach, but I wouldn't say she is naturally
Yeah.
a populist.
Zoran Mandami has embraced affordability. I think, right now, it is the word that everybody is using that seems to be, I don't want to say glossing over, but people from the abundance wing of the Democratic Party like affordability, people from the populist wing like affordability. Is affordability the answer? Is it a proxy for populism, or is it separate from populism? And is it the right thing? Because that is what it looks like Democrats are marching forward with.
Cost of living affordability are responses to understanding grassrootsism, that people are telling us this, that they are frustrated and angry and upset about it. The question of this moment now is how best can you build integrity and credibility with people to say, I got a solution set for you. I can do something about it. That's where I think, Democratic Party, we're struggling through this moment. We're going to get there. I'm confident we will reclaim our glory, as it were, but it has to be built around a solution set that we already know enough that people are telling us this is the major issue. I don't want to go in the next election cycle saying, hey, cost of living is the problem. Like, yes. And we have to suggest that there are 1, 2, 3 things that if you put Democrats in power in the presidency, in the House, and the Senate, we can address it. And certainly expansion of healthcare has been an issue.
Right. That's clearly, yeah.
It's right up there in the major ones. We'll get into some of these issue items, but if we were going into a town hall setting, right, with people, 100 people, and you didn't know anything about them, and I said, Mark, hey, what are you going to go talk to them about? We'd put healthcare out there, and certainly, I would tell you that we got to talk about big tech and the power of big tech. Right now, it's on the minds of so many people. The onset of artificial intelligence, data center construction all across America, electricity rates being affected, water, the human relationships just themselves. There's so many elements to this. We got to be populist. And that's it. We got to meet people where they're at. This is a serious concern for them. Let's talk to them about the labor displacements, et cetera, et cetera. So that's up there on my list. And then, as you're mentioning, we can get into housing, and we can get to a whole variety of grocery impacts that Donald Trump has made worse because of his tariffs regime. That's where I would want us to be thinking about and grappling with. I want a Democratic Party that's curious and interested in solution orientation, to talk to people's populist pain, not to just say, I recognize it, but I want to do something about it.
So Andrew Breitbart, the conservative provocateur who started Breitbart, the news outlet, is famous for saying that politics is downstream of culture. And I am curious because there is a critique of the Democratic Party, which is that we have lost because of culture issues. And that we need to figure out how to address those culture issues before voters are open to hearing policy prescriptions on the other things. I'm curious what you make of that. And also, I'll give you a lot of credit. You've been, I think, you were early to we need to open the tent a little further, which is not, by the way, usually associated with the part of the Democratic Party that you come from, which is what's so interesting about it, right? Is that, like, usually people think, oh, it's the Bernie wing that wants to keep the tent narrow. And actually, part of why I found some of your talks very early this year, like, I was like, wow, Faiz and I really may agree on a lot more than I thought we did.
Thank you for that, Mark. And you're among the litany of the things that I had done in the past. Also, is I was ACLU's national political director, and I felt strongly, still do, about civil rights and civil liberties protections in America and expanding upon them. And in my view, when we are engaged in appropriate populism and grassrootsism, we are listening to and engage with how people feel about these quote unquote cultural or social issues, however you want to put them. And I'll just give you my own take, and I appreciate that other people may have differences of viewpoints. But my diagnosis of the problem is that when we have in place economic justice and class-based conversations first if we haven't established the primacy of them, we then revert to and lose on issues that become then deemed to be social and cultural. In my view, partly because the thing that many working class people are demanding and asking of us is to find the common ground on the economic justice things that they know we agree with them on. I know you agree with me on paid sick days. I know you agree with me on Medicare and Social Security. I know you agree with me on the corruption of the billionaire in our politics and our economy. But I need to hear that you give a damn about it. So win me over on that first. Then I'll give the allowance for where people are going to have differences of viewpoints on immigration, on policing, on a whole variety of things. And in my view, on a lot of those things, people are three-dimensional. They are not one-dimensional. You will find that the people, the unlikeliest opinions on a lot of these things, because quite frankly, people deal with it. You've dealt with this, like trans issues. Like then you realize, oh, this person has a trans daughter. Oh, okay. Not what you would have thought. I think what they want to see first and foremost, can you fight for the things that we're going to agree on and give allowance and understanding for disagreement on things that we might disagree with them. If you look at Zohran Mamdani, that's his core piece of how he's won and how he continues to govern. It's like, here's the things that I know you're with me on. Now we're going to have a conversation. I'm going to tell you my viewpoints with conviction and honesty about things that I believe in the realms of, what you call immigration or a lot of other issues. And I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to hear you if you have a difference of viewpoint. We'll go back and forth on it. I tend to think most of the majority of the American public actually is with us on a lot of those, as long as they hear us saying we're open to an evolving and honest conversation with them.
So we got to lead with the economics, which, like I said, I know from talking to my parents and grandparents, like what FDR offered them was economic opportunity, the ability to have a job and have dignity in the work they did. My brother and I have achieved economically and also educationally something that would have been unimaginable, to prior generations. That was the gateway into the Democratic Party. That then the rest of it, I would listen to my parents, and sometimes their views were not as progressive as mine were, but that core sense that the Democratic Party was fighting for them economically was what kept it together. And I guess I'd ask you, when did that stop happening?
Well, we lost the track on economic justice issues for sure, and the primacy of them, the convincing and
When?
persuading. I think especially as the economy became much more complicated and convoluted. So over the past 2 or 3 decades, as the economy not only has the wealth and power and equality gotten to where it's gotten to, as the monopolists have gained more and more control over an economy, there's been a more buying of the economy and the politics on both sides. And we've seen the wealth and influence have much more of a greater role of politics than ever before, such that, Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg at Donald Trump's inauguration, it wouldn't have been, that wouldn't have been a thing like 3 decades ago. Now there's a purchase of the government. And so the stakes have increased, and at the same time, you've seen that the right is taking advantage of the left, saying, okay, well, if you don't talk about economic primacy, if you don't own this space, if you go into an entire election cycle, you don't even talk about the minimum wage, which is kind of crazy, then what we're going to do is define the fact that you seem to be vapid on this stuff. So we'll fill in the blanks for people, and we're going to call you defund the police. We're going to say you're woke this thing or woke that thing. Because if you go back to the Kamala ad, right, I think one of the reasons why I think that ad it as an attack worked fairly well is if you watch her engage with that issue, you see her almost come alive and help explain and understand in her viewpoint, why is trans healthcare important for certain populations? I see and understand why she cares about that. And I tend to believe it's of conviction and a place where she honestly believes. But when they sense that that's the only thing, or that's the major thing that makes you come alive, but when we're all swimming in wealth and income inequality, we have to take on the elites, and they are corrupting our economy. I want you to come as alive on those scores. I want to see you fight in the same manner that this matters to you. That's the core. And when we lose that, we get defined by the things that, quite frankly, the right is trying to pin on you as the least popular items, and then they drag you into the wrong terrains.
So I'll give you some insight into kind of my own political evolution. I was once asked actually by W. Wasserman Schultz at the DNC in a group setting why I was a Democrat, and I said I was born a Democrat. Like it was because of the New Deal and what the Democratic Party had done for my family. And I grew up as a Democrat. And I grew up as a very sort of conventional Democrat and considered myself, and still do, in kind of the liberal tradition of the Democratic Party. I started to become much more radicalized, probably towards populism, because I started to see that corporate America that had told us that it could do anything, like they were all powerful, that they could solve every problem, like we should have faith in them as a pillar of the society we live in. I saw them after the voter suppression laws were passed in 2001. They took out a print ad in the New York Times. Literally, the major corporations of America decided to respond to mass voter suppression in the state of Georgia by taking out a print ad. Now, if you looked up in the dictionary, what is the least you could do? A print ad in the New York Times and the Washington Post would qualify as the very least you could do. Here are people who had told people like me, don't worry, we can solve all of the world's problems. And they were unwilling to take on voter suppression using their lobbyists and their money and their corporate power. They were unwilling to take it on. And I have watched through now the Biden administration. They did not push for the Freedom to Vote Act or the For the People Act. They did not push for reauthorizing the Voting Rights Act, which they had taken credit for in past years. In 2006, the reason why the bill passes 98-0 in the Senate, the Voting Rights Act, is in part because Walmart puts money behind it, and they put muscle behind it, and they made it a lobbying issue. And by the time we get to, Joe Biden's administration, they are doing literally nothing for democracy. And now, with Donald Trump in office, I don't even call them capitulators. I call them collaborators, because they're in it. They're in a joint venture with this administration. They're not victims of anything. The corporate media and the corporate billionaire class and the big tech companies, they're joint venturing with this administration to destroy democracy. And so, literally, I have found myself agreeing with you and people in your camp more and more that if that is happening in democracy, that is happening in all of these other areas.
And why, right? Let's stay with that, Mark. Why? Because we have these corporate colluders, as you're referring to them, and I agree with that. And their ethics, their values, I talked about this hubris, this self-interest, this greed, makes them worship the almighty dollar. So for $1, I will give up any sense of economic patriotism or belief in this country or belief in wanting other people around me to succeed. It's a downward slide in which the people who don't have their wealth and power are pushed further down so that they can accumulate more. And so in exchange for a corporate tax rate reduction, some business expensing that they get out of the way, one big beautiful bill, they get, Medicaid cuts, they like these things. And in exchange, they'll fund the destruction of the East Room. They'll do the things that you're talking about on democracy. And I promise you this is what we have to be mindful of. If a Democratic president comes in with a Democratic House and a Democratic Senate, do you know what these corporate colluders will do? They are coming back to say, I want to purchase. Hey, I was your best friend. I promise you, I'm sorry for the last few years. I never really liked Donald Trump. I didn't really like the right-wing agenda. But I hope you understand, my heart is with you guys. And I would like to be your best friend now. So will you please give me roles in the administration, roles with, give me a chance to shape your agenda. And at that point, my view is to say that we have to have deep convictions in the sense of what are the fundamental problems that we're trying to address, in which we co-opt, but make people, if you want to sign up to do what we want to do, this is what Zoran is trying to advocate, right? Say, hey, you want to get childcare done? Great. You don't? Get the heck out of my way, right? You want to expand things for working class people and improve their lives. We're here for that. And I'll co-opt you into that fight. But too often the purchase of these corporate colluders, as you're talking about, has been the destruction of not only American democracy and American economy, it's built authoritarianism on all fronts, which is obviously depriving a lot of us of individual liberty and freedom.
Yeah, I'm not so sure I'm even interested in them coming back into a coalition to do good things. They have done so much damage already. We're only 11 months into this administration. They've done so much damage that honestly, I am not sure that they can ever be trusted to be part of a coalition.
For sure. I just think of the people who need help in America, right? If you're working at Walmart in, or in Georgia or in Texas, you're getting $7.25 an hour or somewhere around there, right? You're Dollar General, you're getting paid bottom of the barrel. They need to see that amount go up. There's some people just need their livelihoods to improve. Childcare needs to be delivered. And so I in my view, I'm just like, if we can squarely focus on a bold economic agenda that improves people's lives, we got to push some of these corporate actors to say, we're going to demand that you do your part. Corporate rates going to go up.
Yeah.
We're going to have a billionaire surtaxes. We're going to do things to make sure that we right foot our economy.
Right. I agree with all that. I guess what I'm saying is I'm not sure I'd ever trust these corporatists to act in good faith.
That's why we're all populists now. We're here for the fight. It ain't going to be easy. We're what we're here for.
I got to ask you this, though. As someone who does center democracy in his life and in his work, and my view is that without a functioning democracy, you won't have any of these other things. Like, you need to have a functioning. It is not enough to have a raise in the minimum wage if we don't have the right to vote. It is not enough to have better healthcare if we don't have a government that is ultimately responsive to the people. Because if the government isn't responsive to the people, we won't get and sustain those things. I sense from you and I count you among my friends across the Democratic coalition who tell me this from all perspectives, you can't lead with democracy. So tell me, where does democracy fit into this populist vision?
I would say it differently than you would. I don't disagree with the things you said, to be clear. When I am going before a working class audience and I wanted to persuade them, and I try to think of language of persuasion to my mind of people who don't already agree with us and about the issues of democracy being under assault. I think, in sense, that there is a disbelief that one government can do anything effectively anymore. That there's just a kind of erosion of people with integrity who can make this damn machine work again. So that's one. Number two is around that is the notion, can any institution work? I mean, put aside government for a moment. Can anything that has a lot of people involved within it, can you come in and move those to do something positive rather than to worship an almighty dollar and accumulate more profits and service the wealthy and the powerful? And people are right to raise those series of concerns. What I would then want to try to compel and persuade them around is the belief in institutions, that in order for us to have power here, you yourself are not going to take Walmart on alone. You yourself are not going to take on Amazon. The way in which we do that in society is we have to come together in common purpose and form institutionals that represent us. That is why I believe in labor unions. That is why I believe that the future of how we think about ownership design should involve tenant unions, should involve co-ops. I'm thinking of economic democracy, that the way in which we wrestle power from the top is we devolve power back down to put more power in the hands of small businesses, farmers, tenant unions, labor unions, you name them. We need more power in those hands. Now, when we have economic democracy, guess what that translates into? And you have strong labor unions, what happens, Mark? We have stronger political democracy. And I do think that giving people a sense that in economics, if we can build institutions that service them, seeing their own local economic conditions improve, will give them a sense of faith and belief that in civic life, political participation is also worth it. Don't check out on us.
One of the places where you are definitely making a big difference in the democracy movement, as I conceive of it, and I buy your basic frame, but I want to drill into one particular part of it. And it's something that is a big focus of my time now, is democratizing information and the media. And I started by mentioning that I was a huge fan of the work you did at Think Progress, which, as you point out, was at Center for American Progress when John Podesta, who you and I both know and fondly have worked with.
An institution builder, Mark.
And an institution.
Let's connect two threads there, right?
Yeah. And now you have More Perfect Union, which is an award-winning media company that is like doing unbelievably powerful work. And anyone who has not checked out its YouTube channel, I know you can check out all of its different ways of delivering information, but its YouTube channel is unfucking believably good. Like, you have to watch it. It is some of the most compelling video content you will ever find. I have become people in my life, they follow me on social media, like, Mark, you spend half of your time just beating up on corporate media. And I'm like, yes, I wish I had more life to give to beat up on corporate media more, because the betrayal of people who said that they cared about democracy and cared about the plight of everyday Americans, which is, after all, what the First Amendment is there to give the institutional media some power to do. They are failing. They are failing to hold power to account. They are failing to help everyday Americans understand the world as it is. And you are a big part of changing that. And you have been since, like I said, I mean, I don't even know how long ago Think Progress was. So talk to me about the power of independent media, the power of the importance of a healthy media ecosystem, and how you have evolved from really what was a much more sort of facts, kind of data driven kind of media to a much more storytelling kind of media. Help sketch that out.
Well, when we launched Think Progress way back in 2004, Judd Legum, myself, Amanda Turkle, Nico Pitney, it was a idea of that, as you say, in the Bush era, were there core facts about the lies being told around the Iraq War, later like national security apparatus, everything Guantanamo, the wiretaps, and then obviously the tax cuts and Medicare price negotiation. You remember all these fights well.
Privatizing Social Security. Remember, Republicans wanted to privatize everyone's Social Security.
And so during this period of time, we feel, hey, somebody needs a primary source system. What are the lies that are being told? And we just started with that, just basic core research, put it out, primary source. And over time, what we started to realize and learn is that, man, people were treating us as media. You know, we came kind of to do research, and they started to say, hey, we look to you as almost, kind of a corollary to the New York Times. We read the New York Times first, and then we go to you to see what other news we've missed. And then I tried to start to honor and hold that. Okay, if we're starting to be treated like media by our audience, we need to start acting like it, which would require us to kind of pick up the phone, call people, check on sources, do our due diligence. With power comes great responsibility. And so we have to own that. Now, as I built up More Perfect Union with the great team here, it's like this second iteration is to say video at this moment is that primary source. And it's the way in which, in my mind, we can reach working class audiences who may not be reading the New York Times, may not be reading Substacks, maybe not reading a lot of print stuff, but are consuming a lot of video. And my goal is to say, hey, video can help capture the emotional valence of stories in ways that print cannot, right? If I show you the faces of a soybean farmer getting screwed by an Argentinian bailout, it does a little bit more for you than if I just wrote it into print. And that has been the kind of core recipe for us, is just be primary source, be on the ground, be where the pain and suffering is, and then to capture that emotional valence with some deep storytelling. Yeah, so far, thankfully, we're doing all right with it.
You're doing more than all right. I mean, you guys are a huge success. You have an enormous audience. You're winning awards. And like I said, the content is just spectacularly compelling. I mean, we're going to put a link to the YouTube channel here. I was listening the other day to, this is like very wonkish, but I was listening the other day to a media podcast interviewing Malcolm Gladwell about the media business. So in other words, it wasn't Malcolm Gladwell who I can take or leave and you could take or leave, but he, has written a number of books and he has a podcast, and he was talking about how he decides what to put in a podcast versus what he puts in a book or an article and all of that. And I found it actually quite interesting at that level. And one of the things he said is that audio and visual are much, much more important for storytelling. And written is much more important for facts and figures. He said it's very hard to do a video or audio podcast where there are a lot of key facts and figures or graphs. He's like, it just doesn't work. And likewise, if you want to connect emotionally, it is much harder to do that in writing than it is audio or video. And so you have done actually both of those things in the native format that he suggests. And again, this is obviously just one man, but he is, he's written best-selling books and he's got a pretty wide audience. And I'm curious if you think with More Perfect, where obviously you're doing the storytelling, the emotional connection and meeting people where they are, is there still a place for a Think Progress? Is there still a place for that? Because I don't trust I'll just say, I don't trust the Washington Post at all. I don't trust mostly the New York Times. You can go ahead and tell me all about their reporting, and I can tell you that they had a reporter who was emailing with Jeffrey Epstein about whether he could get photos of was being offered photos of girls with Donald Trump in bikinis, and somehow that never wound up in the New York Times. So don't bother. I can spare you. Don't bother telling me that you get this from the New York Times. Have you ever thought about rebuilding kind of that more fact and figure media entity?
You're very kind to telling people to, watch some of our YouTubes. And I'll tell you, when we write the scripts for these things, and they're like 15-minute videos, and I promise you, there is a ton of research that goes into kind of the key facts and figures of, let's say, John Deere or Starbucks or whatever, Amazon or AI, whatever the issue that we're trying to cover. There's a healthy amount of research that has to go into that. And I'm owning that for a lot of people, let's go in this corporate media problem, is that the corporate media, especially on economic issues, has become part of the problem. They are living in the elite class. And when you're living in elite class and lacking self-awareness of it, do you want to challenge the elite class? That was historically a great role that media could play and should play. You are supposed to challenge those with power. And unfortunately, as the dynamics in the economy of media have changed, they worship, again, the almighty dollar, and they need advertising revenue and are afraid to upset advertisers, afraid to upset those who could disrupt the way in which they could make their money. Then we've seen, especially on the economic side, far less exposure of the corporate corruption that occurs. They're just far less interested, which has opened the door for a lot of independent media. And I'll tell you, from my own vantage point, there's a desire of a lot of people to consume this information. The thing that we did with More Perfect Union, and you remember this with Think Progress, is I think it challenged the notions that could people consume an institutional brand? I was told for a long period of time, if you're Joe Rogan or if you're Tucker Carlson or if you're, you name the personality, Megyn Kelly or whatever, you can do well. That's what you get rewarded by in this format. I'm telling you that, yes, you can, and you can also get rewarded as independent media who does depth in storytelling around institutional value, that the brand of More Perfect Union is not the Faiz Shakir show. It is the brand of More Perfect Union saying, earning credibility with people, saying, this is a place that tells me about the economy from the vantage point of, by, for working class people. I welcome more comers into this market to think the same way. You don't have to just be a brand unto yourself, a name. There's a lot of those for sure, right, in this space. To build institutions like a New York Times or Washington Post, right? That was their historical lineage, that they were built as institutions. And then as their credibility starts to wane, I want people to be thinking about building institutions in independent media realm as well. And the center left has been remiss on this, by the way, Mark, right? Like for a long period of time, the center right has built more institutions of informational purveyance and has gotten more of a following, and the center left is now only starting to catch up.
Yeah, no, look, you and I totally agree on this. It's one of the reasons why, Democracy Docket is not on Substack, right? We have our own independent technology stack. The channel is not, it's not marcelias.com. The channel is not Marc Elias. Like, we've got a newsroom with 20 people. It does original reporting. All of that reporting is free on its website. It's bylined by reporters who come from places like the Houston Chronicle and Axios who have joined us. And the goal is to build a pro-democracy media outlet that is not, as you say, like one person, right? Because the one critique I do here that I think is legitimate is you'll hear people say, well, but the legacy media are the only ones doing actual reporting. And I do think it's important that there be left of center voices and brands that are doing original reporting and not just commentary.
And on that point, just very briefly, and kudos to you, honestly, for building this up. I'm glad you're in this space and doing the work you do. We need more voices like it, but we are in a symbiotic relationship. Some of us can't do our jobs without, Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg also doing their jobs. However, we are in the historical lineage of advocacy journalism, which is really important. Like, it is in some sense the most honest form of journalism, right, Mark? I mean, you're almost revealing your bias at the door for readers to know where you're coming from, and you're giving them facts and honest information as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I take a lot of pride with Democracy Docket. We are unapologetically pro-democracy. We are left of center. We don't hide that. We state that proudly. But if we make a mistake, we issue a correction. And all of the fact checkers who have looked at our site, they say it is left of center, but they also say it's factually accurate. And I think you're right. And you guys are an even better example of that. But I want to use this opportunity though to gain your reaction, because you say that, the media companies are captive to their, that, they live in bubbles of people of affluence, and they accept advertising dollars. I think it's worse than that. So I think the fact is that, Disney doesn't give a crap about the person watching their news. They are trying to milk every last dollar they can off of theme parks and off of, their other corporate ventures, their streaming services. They're just trying to figure out how to take a service that is $10.99 and make it $11.99. And the Washington Post doesn't give a crap about, the owner of the Washington Post is trying to get contracts with Donald Trump and to suck up to him, and doesn't give a crap about this.
You're saying, I mean, in some ways, media has become a play toy for a lot of these billionaires. It's an afterthought. They build it and they say, hey, this is my little purview to just, shape an economy, a political economy that works for my benefit. And yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I just want, part of that corporate rot that you're talking about is also built into the big tech companies.
Yeah, right. I was going to get to the tech companies next.
Right, because one of the things we all don't know enough about and deserve to know is that algorithms govern our lives. When you see, whatever you see on X or YouTube or Facebook, or wherever you go, an algorithm has pushed it to you. It used to be a time, but back in the day when you and I first started this work, decades ago, you would go to, let's say, Twitter, and it was a timeline. You would just or blogs, old school blogs. It was just timeline. I would just see everything in horizontal, vertical fashions, however it was framed up. Now that's not the case. Things are getting pumped to you, and none of us know how and why a big tech algorithm has decided that you're going to see a certain thing on a certain day, which is obviously having a huge impact on all of society. My point on that is the almighty dollar is governing that algorithm, which is doing so much destruction, both to our democracy and our economy.
Yeah. And my only point is, I don't buy that it's just even the almighty dollar of whether to show more perfect unions video makes them more or less money. It might be they have other business interests that they don't want people to see your videos for other reasons. So I don't want to go too far down the conspiratorial rabbit hole that I have sort of entered into, but I have very much become a skeptic, more than a skeptic, a deep critic of what big corporate America is doing to our democracy, to our society, and our economics.
Just real quickly on this, on advocacy journalism, which you and I both agree with and is important, Thomas Paine's Common Sense pamphlets, right? This is a whole history of advocacy journalism. When we have advocacy journalism, as you and I do, there's a sense of editorial vision. Why do you come to Democracy Docket? Why do you come here to read? Because somebody has given a sense that this is important information. I want to hear that sense. When you don't have that, think about when you don't have advocacy journalism. Well, then something else is governing why you're coming to X site, right? What is it that's governing that? In my view, their advertising dollars are trying to mobilize you to come to there. So in lieu of replacing it with a sense of vision, ethics, integrity of a type of content that we're trying to kind of curate on your behalf to say, this is the stuff that we really all need to hear and see, they're saying, hey, I can get $1 off of trolling you, basically. And that is what the vast majority of the media ecosystem, sadly, has now become.
So I wanted to end with this. So we still have the 2026 cycle in front of us. Then we will, of course, have the 2028 presidential cycle. How do you see Democrats and Democratic candidates interacting in this new media environment? In what you just described. Every time I watch Democrats on the Sunday shows, I literally just go like that. I'm like, what? You think that this is, first of all, you think this is like anyone's watching? You think you're persuading anyone, and all you're doing is putting dollars in the pocket of the Ellisons, Disney, or Comcast. It feels like the right does have a different relation. The right-wing media ecosystem has a different relationship with its candidates. And I'm curious, because you've run a presidential campaign and you had to balance do I do meet the press? Do I do a big rally? Do I do a podcast? Do I talk to, whoever. Like, and obviously this is all evolving, probably even you're going to say since when you were running Bernie
Yeah.
Sanders' left campaign. But how do you
Long.
see Democrats navigating this new media ecosystem?
Well, when I was talking before about the failure of grassrootsism and wanting to regrow, rebirth of grassrootsism within the Democratic Party, one of the ways in which we will know that it's succeeding together, Mark, is when we do see a bunch of center-left outlets reaching scale of the kind that we have seen on the right, PragerU's, Daily Wires, and I can go on and on about a number of channels on the right, all on YouTube. They have well over millions and millions and millions of views. They've successfully, in my mind, cultivated a sense of grassroots. MAGA came out of this. Trump kind of owned some of this and moved it for his own ends. On the center left, we are doing it, we're growing it, but it is not sufficiently yet at scale. And when we start to continue to invest in this direction, we will know in this next cycle that the value of reaching millions and millions of people will be more important and more able to you if you are able to reach key influencers on YouTube or TikTok or what have you. Right now, we're not still able to do it. As a result, if you're on the center left and you say tomorrow, if I walk into president's office and I say, hey, we need to reach tens of millions of people, you want to roll out your Medicare expansion plan, how are we going to do it? The answer is paid ads. But paid ads still to this day
Yeah,
plays
that's right.
too much of
That's
a
right.
role. And if I walked into President Trump's office and I said, hey, you're going to do this grand deportation thing in South Los Angeles and we need everybody to know about it, he says, I don't have a problem here. I got a guy, he punches a button and he reaches 160 million people. And I got another guy who reaches 100 million people on a podcast. He can reach scale very quickly without having ever done a paid ad. That is what we are missing in the left to center ecosystem. As we get there, knock on wood, in 2008 we will, that you will have sensed and felt that grassrootsism was reborn because a bunch of left of center outlets now have millions and millions of people that reach. And then as a result, the politicians will follow and you'll find them going on Midas Touch, Democracy Docket, More Perfect, whatever the case might be, and talking to us because they will have seen the commanding audiences. That's what we got to get to.